I've seen a lot. Amid the celebrity allure of entrepreneurship, many exceptional entrepreneurs remain shadowed. Here, I team up with these hidden talents to unveil their challenges and successes. Dive in with me to unearth entrepreneurial gems, learn from our experiences, and get educated. Do you guys share or train on tools and tricks to expand your capacity bucket, or is it possible to do that?
So, let's put it in the context of flying a big jet. So you're going across the Atlantic, and we know we're going to go into, say, Chicago or Atlanta, somewhere that's very busy. You don't want to start talking about which arrival, which roadway, which interstate, effective, if you're driving a car, is going to get you there. You want to work. You already need to know your arrival. It's probably on your flight plan, but you need to know the points at which you're going to descend and the speeds. Then you're going to have, what approach are you likely to make? But what if they change that? What if situation, right? What if? So we do all this. So we've got the big picture, and then maybe half hour, 40 minutes before the top of descent, we'll recap that with the latest information, update it. But we already created the baseline. We know this is what we're expecting. And then, at what point is the fuel getting low? At what point, how many minutes can we hold for before we divert to, say, I know we're to Dallas or wherever, this is the whole thing. So think about that with your business. Where are you heading? What are the threats, right? So, like, the guy who invented the fax machine, he probably thought he'd made something pretty amazing until the guy who invented the internet turned up, and you know, you know. So what happened to was it
the VHS guy?
VHS, Betamax, and like Netflix, right? And
yeah.
and Kodak, Eastman Kodak, and the Polaroid camera. I mean, actually, they made a comeback, but yeah. So what was a great idea, and it was a great idea. And, was it Tesla or was it Edison, who created sort of harnessed electricity. So these are the things, is what's the thing that, and we can't anticipate it all, but if we had perfect knowledge of all cycles, we probably could. So what cycles do, by understanding what lies ahead, right? We are, you can be prepared for it. And therefore, you are reducing, if not in the perfect world, eradicating the amount of hope, fear, and greed. So, God forbid, well, I probably won't be around in 2073, but 2057 we're talking about, right? There's probably going to be a bull market starting in maybe 2054 or something like that, 52. And then people go, I'm going to get in on that, this is good. And everybody says, you want to buy this, buy that, and so on. And it's going like mad. In 2057, all the late joiners are coming in, buying at the top. But they didn't watch this podcast back in 2024 that forewarned them that something was going to happen, because they said this is going to the moon, because that's what the equivalent of then television, the equivalent of then CNBC and everybody else is saying. And that's because human behavior as a herd mentality doesn't change. So, that is the issue. That is the issue. Right?
I think that's a really good point for everybody to take, is, herd mentality is not going to change over time.
No, absolutely. That's it. And that's the way we're built. That's it. So we can personally work on ourselves to try and improve that. And we can learn to control our emotions and emotional reactions. And we can learn to increase our own situational awareness. And it's not just in business. It's not just in flying airplanes. It's not just in trading. It's in our relationships as well. And, and everything. And, not just our intimate or romantic relationships, our business relationships and so on. You can see where, you gel with somebody in a business and it goes really well. And the next thing is like, he doesn't want, or she doesn't want to do this and you don't want to do that. And you can see it coming, right? And so what do? If you think you're onto something good, you can say, okay, I can see we have a difference. I can see that if we carry on down this pathway, it's going to be a bigger problem. Let's resolve it now. And one of this, there's two ways. Like, let's resolve the difference and keep going. We're actually, you know what? We're so far apart. Let's just knock it on the head right now. And in fact, actually, I do remember talking to Keith Cunningham, that we've already mentioned, about a business thing that I was working on, and he just saw exactly what I thought was the best thing ever. It was going to make millions, and he just said, this is a non-starter. Nobody wants this stuff. And it's all to do with personal development, right? He said, he said the 12 or 18 of you sitting in this room might want it, but that's it. And he said, once you've sold it to the 17 other people here, you're done. And you want to open a store downtown London? You're getting nobody in there. It's like, no, everybody will come in. Nobody cares about personal development apart from you guys and us, right?
Right.
That's it. We're it.
That's hilarious.
Is the time we're recording this, most of the other people are in the pub right now, right? So,
Yeah,
or on
that's
their
true.
TikTok,
Especially over in Europe, right? Yeah.
Yeah,
One of the things I was thinking about was like, the perfect like example to this in people's lives are anybody with a child. There are cycles like, you know, kids between whatever it is, 2 and 3-ish for the terrible twos. They're trying to get their independence. They call it the terrible twos. It's not the terrible twos. They're just trying to get their independence. Like, don't make a big deal out of it. Just see it as it is, not worse than it is. And then and then kids like, our experience was, and we did a lot of reading around this, but for a year or two, they loved mom, and then they more affection to dad, and then back to mom, and then back to dad. It's like that ebb and flow of like they're trying to get their things figured out with their parents, and then they start dating, and at 14 and 15 or whatever it is, in that range, 16, they start quitting all their sports and they start dating and they're doing all this stuff. It's like, I invested all this money in hockey and now he doesn't want to play hockey. Well, no shit, he doesn't want to. It's like they're so consistent. They might individually be a little different, but the cycle of something changing, at certain age categories, it is like, it's like, it's like I got a
that's
buddy
it.
who's the kids go off to university. It's like, well, I don't hear from them. Yeah, no kidding. Like, that's like, it's not because they don't love you. It's just because they have another phase of their life that they're.
So let's nail this one right now. This is an easy one. A lot of you will have heard of the 7-year itch, right? Okay,
Yep.
it's actually 7.5 years for a year itch, and it's in 4 phases, right? 0 to 7.5, you got the infant that really is attached to the mother, right? Certainly the early part of that, the first half of that, 7 years, 7.5 years. And actually, when you get to 7, people say, show me a child at 7, I'll show you the adult. But we'll come back to that in a minute.
Okay.
Between 7 and 14 is the next phase, really to puberty, right? So 14, 15, and then from 15, so 14 to 21, 22, 22 and a half, that's sort of the adult maturing. It's suddenly like, I'm a grown up, right? And then the last bit is the mastery of being a grown up, when you get you to the age of 30. So anything you've messed up, by the time you get to the age of 29, 30, that's where the challenges arrive. That's why you'll see people changing jobs at 30. You'll see relationships breaking up. You'll see relationships starting. You'll see ideas and different things happening big time between the ages of 28 to 30, because it's a 7-year itch and it's 4 cycles. You put that to your career, right? So let's say you're not feeling really, not particularly well, right? And you want to go and see a physician, right? So ideally, you wanted them to go through medical school for like 7 years, right? And, get some hands-on training under supervision. In the next 7 years, you want to see them go and become sort of proficient at their work. So they've now done 14 years in medicine. They're kind of like a middle-level doctor. But then the guy you really want to see is the guy he's in that mastery of 14, 15 to like 22 years there. He's the guy who's seen it all. He's like, he's your top cardiologist, your top oncologist, whatever. So you can see these are the levels of mastery. And then the last level to the 30 years, which is usually what brings people in a career to retirement, right? So, takes them into their 50s or whatever if they started the career there. So this is and we talk about the 7-year itch. So you start a relationship and you think it's crisis at 7 years, or right, oh, maybe we'll get married now, or another 7 years, maybe we'll have a kid, maybe we'll move house. And the idea is, we talked about overlaying 10-year cycles, right? If you want to do some stuff on yourself, look at where you started a new career. Look what happened after 7 years. Plot them on a line. Do a relationship, 7 years, and do that. And every now and then, some of these lines will align. You'll see interesting things happening there. When you moved house, when you had a kid, when you got married, when you started a significant relationship, changed career, got a promotion, and it's as regular as clockwork.
That's crazy. It's interesting. Well, there's the guest challenge right there. Um, we talked about global war cycles. Is there a cycle? So is there a tech? Because obviously technology is a big thing right now, especially for business people. Whenever I have conversations with these business people, oftentimes, not all the time, but oftentimes, one of the things that'll come up is that their concern or fear of technology disrupting their business. Is there a technology cycle that you guys track that you might be able to have some insights on what may or may not happen or the significance of AI or whatever? I'm just kind of playing with it a little bit for some fun.
There is. It's quite a complex one. The master technology cycle is the same as the war cycle. It's an innovation, or it's a revolution cycle. Okay, it's all about revolution. So you get political revolution the same way as you get revolution in technology. One we talked about the fax machine being phased out. The arrival of electricity, whatever. Televisions, radio, and that there are different time cycles on this. But what we know is every time there is a significant new technology, you get a boom. So let's go back. The bust in 1929 was everybody got a radio. RCA, Radio Corporation of America, the stock went up absolutely parabolically. It was the leader and it plummeted, right? So aviation stocks were booming at that time. And in fact, let me come back to aviation cycles in a minute. The television cycles. Then we move over to 1995, early 90s, mobile phone cycles, internet, personal computer, all that sort of stuff. So these are the leading groups of what's going on. And like AI, Nvidia. Look at Nvidia right now. That was a big leader, and it's had a pullback and so on. The cycles are more complex because they're dependent on the individual things. But let's go back. Let me just illustrate this 100-year cycle once again, right? So if we take the Wright brothers hang on, let's the first. Let me just find the easiest option here. Was 1969, right? Let me take that. Let's head back to 1919. All right,
Okay.
1919 is when the first airline started. All right,
Oh,
and this is a really interesting one.
what was
19,
it, by the way?
sorry.
1919. What was the airline?
Oh, the airlines, BOAC. It was British South American, Air France, KLM. There were some Americans. This is the end of the First World War and the beginning of the age of aviation, right? And if you go 50, remember we talked about 100-year and 50-year cycles. Add 50 years, you get to 1969. What happened in 1969? The Boeing 747, the first wide-bodied jet for mass travel, came out. The supersonic Concorde flew for the first time. Suddenly, aviation changed massively, okay? And then if you add another 50 years to that, that takes us to 100 years from 1919 takes us to 2019. That was the peak of the air travel just prior to the pandemic crushing of the airlines. But also, let's go back to the Wright brothers in 1903, 1900 to 1903. Add 50 years. The first jet engine aircraft, the Comet, the first jet airliner came in 1951, and then 51, 52. Add 50 years, 2002. That was when the A380 was in its inception, which was the biggest aircraft ever built. And there's nothing been built since then. Aircraft have been getting smaller. So you can see these technology patterns unfolding. The same with steamships. Sailing ships were overshadowed by steamships for 100 years. And then, the technology went to the next level and so on. There's a 100-year cycle in transportation. And so that's close to the innovation cycle. But the innovation cycles vary, but they will lead to a boom in the stock market because each one of these is an investment area. So you can see these are very, very precise things if you know where to look. And you've got to understand, you've got to step back and see the big picture concept because people say, hey, you're just making it up. And it's like, well, I'm not. But, I'm not going to argue with it. You can think what you like. I don't care because I've got the advantage. So, yeah, and the more people like you that think we're making it up, the better for us that know it works. So, because, when you're trading and investing and, that's the primary business we have is money management. It's kind of, you got to have somebody to take the money off because it's not a zero, it's
It's a zero sum game, right?
Zero sum game. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you got to have somebody on the other side of the trade. And that's why when Bitcoin goes up next time, the smart money will be pumping it up so they can be getting out. And that's where FOMO will come in again. The hope will come in as Joe Public says, this is your next opportunity. And, and the smart money's, dumped it. Well, dumped it. In fact, let's just talk about Sir John Templeton. After the atomic bombs were dropped on Japan and on Hiroshima and Nagasaki in 1945, in the summer of 1945, that land was so irradiated. John Templeton bought it up, knowing that nobody else would want it. He was buying, literally, he said, when there's blood on the streets, because at some point that land would come back round again, which it did. Yeah. So this is the whole thing. This is the contrary part of hope, fear, and greed. If you can see blood on the streets, maybe you want to get in, and if you can see euphoria, you definitely want to be out. You don't want to overstay the party. So, as my wife keeps telling me, but I like
you never want to be the last person to leave the party.
Exactly.
Especially with a lampshade on your head.
Yeah.
When there's a war cycle, how do you know if it's going to be in the Middle East or if it's Russia and Ukraine? Like, how did you know that stuff?
So you have to put it into context. So I keep here a whole series of timelines for different countries. And the context is it has to relate to that. You can't take us. I mean, yeah, we did look at the global world war cycles, but you have to look at everything relating to America on the American timeline, everything relating to Persia, Iran on that line, Iraq. They were all different. You've got to look at the history of these countries, how they came together, or come into present day existence. So you put them into context. But then, if you want to look at the history of two nations, so for conflict purposes, you got to look at the timeline of when were they previously, in conflict. And by looking at all these and looking at the various different cycles, that's where every now and then you'll get a whole bunch of people coming together. And let me just explain this concept of, we talked about the wheel within the wheel, but let's say let's say you come to my town over here in Surrey, and there's a cafe that I'll go and get a coffee and read and make some notes every now and then. And I go in there every week. And then let's say our friend Kim from Australia flies in, and she comes and joins me once a month. And then you come in every 6 months. What's the date all three of us are going to be in that cafe together? Because that's when the big party's going to be. Do you see what? Yeah. As you were talking about parties and people with lampshades on their heads and so on. But the idea is that, when is everybody going to be in the room? When is everything, if you're physicists, when is everything coming into phase? When is everything into phase and converging? And that's it. And when is the exact convergence? And that's what it's all about.
It's an insane science. Like, it's crazy how much work you guys must do to track this.
So really, the point is there order in the world? Is there some resemblance of order? Is there a higher degree of order? Or is actually all this premeditated, even though I keep talking about free will? And is human behavior ever going to change? I don't think human behavior is ever going to change, And there comes every now and then, civilization wipes itself out, or is wiped out by a natural disaster, or a meteorite or something like that. But what's going to happen if we get wiped out, just say in the next few hundred years? Let's put it a little bit more into the future. The archaeologists who are finding dinosaurs and old things and bits and pieces, what are they going to find from this era? They're going to say that this whole generation was wiped out because they didn't figure out what the cloud was, because everything went into the cloud. All this is digital. And if you don't understand what the internet is, which an archaeologist can't figure out by excavating and so on, some guy 2,000 years ahead from now, he's going to say, civilization wiped out. Everything disappeared. How weird is that? And, you look at some of the old texts, and you look at the Hindu structure, the Vedas, they talk about aircraft flying 4,000 years ago. It's very clear that they talk about the Viman, which is the aircraft that they were flying around in, and so on. So, there is no new thing under the sun. Everything that was and ever will be,
that you just think it's just a cycle that's repeating itself. We reset, and then we have to learn all the new shit all over again.
Yeah, because we're stupid. That's it. Yeah, over generations and tens of generations and hundreds of generations. Yeah. But what's what are the primal things? We want to eat, breathe, and reproduce. That's it. That's it. As simple as that, right? So, you go into the local town here, and people are eating, breathing, and reproducing, and doing much
You
less.
pretty much summed up my days. No. Oh my gosh, that's an interesting concept of, you know, and I don't even know where I fall on, you, the past readings of, centuries ago, where, there was flight or there was technology, or how did the pyramids get built, or all those kinds of things. Like, what kind of technologies were, available at the time. Um, it's yeah, it's actually very interesting to think, like, if we were wiped out right now, what's here? Some cars maybe, and whatever. But I mean, that stuff would actually decompose probably, and you'd be probably no or very little trace of that. But
And then, and the other thing is this talk of science. Scientists. I guess we are scientists to some extent, but there are scientists I speak to who just think that if it can't be defined scientifically within the context of what they know right now, then it's just a load of rubbish. And that's where a lot of this work falls into. But equally, I'd say, well, you know, we could be tilling the fields of medieval England, as serfs working on a farm. And I say to you, 400 years ago, apparently there's something out there called radio waves. And you're going to say, oh, he's talking rubbish, man. We're rubbish. That's nonsense. And it's like, the next thing is you're on the radio right now.
mhm.
And that's it. So we don't know what we don't know, part of Johari's window. And that's the whole thing that limits progress, is that, well, a scientist say, well, all this stuff's a load of rubbish or whatever, and so on.
Yeah, based on from the window that you're viewing it. But yeah, no, it's true. I mean, yeah, just think of it. Like, at one point in time, we all thought the world was flat,
Yeah,
and
exactly.
you'd sail off and fall into oblivion, and never be seen again.
Yeah. Even now I talk to people who say the world's flat. Well, I've been lucky to get up to 60 odd thousand feet and fly supersonically. And I can tell you, it doesn't look flat to me. It looks pretty round. So,
You legit have people that tell you the world's flat? No, you
yeah,
don't. What?
yeah,
Really?
adamant about it. And it's kind of like, I don't have time for this. There's, I
Yeah,
don't have
that'd be.
enough hours in the day. And actually, this is I just going to bring this up because I think people might be interested in this. But somebody told me this a few years ago, that if you assume you're going to get to the age of 80, that means you get 4,000 weeks in your life. And that means, with 20 years to go, you've only got 1,000 weeks left. And when you look at something like that, you think, I ain't got time to mess around and talk to people who think the world's flat, or, whatever, because 1,000 weeks can go pretty quickly.
Mhm.
So I think that's something, whatever is it you're doing, your business, your pursuits, your sports, love of your life, just remember, it's 4,000 weeks in 80 years, and that's not a lot of weeks.
It's funny. Before my dad passed away, I remember him telling me, he's like, when you, just to your point about the 1,000 weeks, to even, you know, exponentialize that. He said to me, he goes, when you get, life starts moving fast between 50 and 60, but then 60 to 70, it is like, it feels like it triple speeds. And then when you get to 70 to 80, it is like, it's on hyperdrive. He just, I mean, he was a very busy guy too. He was very active. He wasn't sitting around. It wasn't like, there was no, the grass was not growing underneath his feet by any stretch. But he just said, it just, the older you get, the faster it seems to roll. So don't squander a minute of it, was just his point. So, dude, what a great conversation about, this is so interesting. I find these cycles, I don't even like, I'm so interested in it. And, I'm,
We can talk more. Keep firing 'em at me. I love all this stuff.
yeah, like, well, I mean, so there's the global war cycle. There's, like, okay, so here's a couple questions actually I did have. And this is, how do you trade this stuff? Like, what for or, if somebody is in the oil industry, how can they use this to their advantage? Or if they're in the technology industry, or if they're in the medical industry or communication industry, like, how can they see some of these trends ahead and start to predict the road ahead, or the path, so that they can make better decisions, so they don't fall into that, risk, tunnel vision. And I guess that would be like, there's a lot of questions in there, but I think probably the first one is, how do you trade it? Like, how do you make this?
Right. So what this is in terms of trading and investing, this is a situational awareness enhancement tool. All right. So when I first created the system, I just traded it myself, or together with my two partners that were involved, and we did very well. And then word got out that these guys had something, and it was kind of like, well, we're kind of doing our own stuff. Then we got chatting to a couple of hedge funds, and we started selling the information because it was money that was coming in for the same work we were doing. Then, we got to the point where, how do we get hold of this? And it was, I always said, I'm never going to write a newsletter or a report. So I write a newsletter and a report now. See how that's... And the idea was...
That's like me saying I'm never going to do a podcast.
Yeah, right. So the idea is that we put these turning point dates into the market timing report. And the purpose of this, it's part of your situational awareness and decision-making process, as we'd say in aviation. And the idea is that people say, well, I think gold is going to go up, right? But I don't know when. And then the next level of sophisticated trader uses something like seasonality, because that gets the odds on your side. Now, let's make it very clear. There is no holy grail in trading and investing. And I don't know anybody that's found it. And I have worked for, I have a non-disclosure. I have worked for a very well-known multi-billionaire that most of you would know as a household name. I can't tell you this, but these people are really sharp. I've worked with several others similar to him, and people do use this information. So the idea is, you think something's going to happen, but you don't know when. And it's all about incremental gains. So if you can fine tune your position to a point where you think we've got a better time window, then it's a good entry point, right? But we have to let the market prove it. And I'm going to come back to how we manage the risk on this in a minute. Then it's going up. And if you're a technical trader, you'll know various charting techniques. And there's some very successful, there's some out there that we teach in our course, which show you how to look for a price for a final high or a final low, because this is all part of natural human behavior. This is the really freaky part of it. This is what gets quantified. But as you get to that point, when do you get out? Because remember, Joe Public and everybody else is like, I'm just going to get my next house, my next Rolex, my next, Patek Philippe, and my next private jet, because he's got the hope thing going on in there as well. But if you know where this, actually, let's be a little bit more sensible. The idea is that you're trend following, okay? Now, trend followers will wait till a previous swing has been taken out to the downside. So you're looking for new highs. And then if a previous low gets taken out, you might want to consider cashing your position in. Some trend followers will wait till the two previous lows have been taken out. That could give back as much as 25 to 30% of your profits over several months or years. So the idea is that if you know there's a very big time window coming in your market, and this is where we put a lot of research into, then we'll say maybe the third week of whatever for that market or whatever. That's, we've got them all highlighted here. And I've got some big cycles on grains coming in and so on. When we know these are coming in, that's the time you want to look to either increase your hedging or raising your stops closer or just taking part of the position off. So what you've now done is, because it's all about incremental gains, you haven't waited for the market to tell you you're wrong and it given back a good percentage of your profits. You've actually managed to get in or you got get out with pretty close to the high or low. And then and effectively what you've done now, if you had the same with the entry as well, based on these cycles, you've now got to also this idea that you're managing the risk far more effectively. And there are techniques that we use where if we know there's a time cycle coming in, we can use some geometry there to highlight and manage the risk really effectively, which is why the 2020 top that we talked about, the mid-February top, which was just 6 weeks into the year from the 1929 cycle. Well, what did we know? The 90-year cycle was in. This was going to be a big one. Okay, we knew that the pandemic had probably just kicked in, and it had just kicked in. It was just starting to simmer. It's kind of like something's happening. We're going to have to start closing things down, and so on. So we knew that was coming in. We hit a price target that was important, and we were able to use the geometry to manage risk. And usually we say if you can get a 3-to-1 minimum risk reward ratio on a trade, you're doing pretty well. We got something like 20-to-1, and in the end, the market just dropped. It didn't drop for that long, only for a month or so, but we did tremendously well on that. And it's the same thing happened in the fund that was running a year before last. We were able to identify these points, and we closed that year. We closed up 34%, beating the S&P by 49%, only because we knew the cycles were in, and so we could get in with a much tighter stop than some of our competitors. And
Right.
that's how you trade it. It's part of your decision-making process. You cannot trade it just by itself. So take it to the next level. We know, for example, there's often a year-end rally, the Santa Claus rally on Western markets. We look to see where the nearest time peak is going to be, to see if it's going to start at the beginning of October. Sometimes it starts on the 4th of October. Sometimes it starts on the 25th, the 26th, or 27th of October. Other times mid-November. So we look ahead to see where those points are coming in. Now, I already told you earlier, and you brought it a few times, saying, well, what's going to happen between the 9th to the 15th, 9th
9th to the 20th.
20th of October. And I have that as a window where I don't want to be in. So even if the end of year rally started, I'm not going to take any risk on that until I get a clear idea of what's going on with the patterns. Gold, again, standard stuff, always bullish back end of August into September. Is it always going to work? Well, if we've got the cycles, we know that the dates are going to change and are going to be reflected in that. What we found, I refer to it as the DNA of the market. It's not perfect, but it gives us a good edge. And, one of our clients, very big energy trader, literally makes a difference of tens of millions to their bottom line. So that's how you trade it, like that. So that's hardcore trading, be it stocks, commodities, and we've got an amazing seasonal platform, so you can just trade that anyway. It's sort of you can live off that anyway. But if you really want to fine tune it, you've got the other dates. If now the second part of your question was, well, what if did you say like in particular industries and so on? Well, there you got to research that industry and look and see what happened within it and find the critical time points and then project the cycles out. So we'll do that for a couple of our clients. And then, equally, everybody should be studying cycles. Who's interested in this should be studying cycles. And, then they can figure it out. We're not the only people here doing cycles in the world. So, but it's just part of your decision-making process. That's it. And it's based on the premise that human behavior is, forecastable mathematically.
And I spent a duration of time trading, and that's when I was using your report. And so, like, for the audience, I've seen this report. I've used this report. It's incredibly accurate. Like, there are some things in it where it's like, I could never really explain it. And you're just, but I'm like, holy shit. Like, and I would remember I'd put arrows in my trading chart and I'd be like, man, God, like, and you do the same, actually. As you were talking, I was like, although I may not be trading now, I still have money invested. And this is something that there's two kind of questions in here. One is, most people are told not to try to time the market, which this is basically a timing the market, a tool. And my take on timing the market is like, in people who have your money invested. So for the record, I think if you are not educated, you should stay in the markets because you will never be able to time those. But using this tool to have a conversation with your investor, the person who's investing your money, only educates you. So I'm actually talking myself into rebuying your market timing report, because it would help me have conversations and align what my investor is saying about what his strategies are for the next quarter or next year or whatever the time period is, to what you're kind of lining for cycles. And it doesn't mean my money doesn't have to be uninvested. We could just reallocate the funds into other areas. Comments on that or not?
Comments on, with regards to the report, the first section of the report looks at the geopolitical cycles. I'll do a geopolitical commentary most months. And then the time cycles are there to help you with this. And the idea is that, the bigger picture stuff is, yeah, I don't disagree with anything you've said. Like if you're not a trader, just stay in there. But bear in mind, there's some pretty interesting bumps coming up over the next few years, because we talked about 1929, the 100-year cycle from 1929. When's that coming in? 2029. Okay, we need to be on alert. Now, it might come in a little earlier than that, because there's a reason to suggest that cycle might sort of shorten. But also, we talked about 1939 and the outbreak of the Second World War. When's the 90-year cycle from that? 2029. So what do we know? 2029, this year, is going to be 90 years from a war cycle, 100 years from a stock market crash. Is it going to happen? I don't think I hope it doesn't, but we need to be aware that there's two major things that are coming out at that point. So you want to protect yourselves as you get into 2026, 2027, and so on. There'll be smaller cycles that will fine-tune things as we get closer to it. And yeah, as you'll have seen in the report, some of the stuff we do every now and then, put the long-term cycles in, and you can see projections that run into 2035 with major turning points in the S&P. And people say, well, is it going to be a higher or lower? I don't know. But here's what we do know is, as we approach each of those points, we know which way the market's going. So we know which way to protect ourselves. So whatever position you're in, when you get to that time window, you're going to be able to protect it. So it's kind of like, every time you get to a crossroads, you'll know that you have to make a decision. But people don't know where those crossroads are. This is showing you where they are. So the idea is actually it's not difficult, but it's a case of how diligent a trader or an investor you are. And most people don't have the patience, because it's not easy. None of this stuff is easy. And let me tell you why. Retail traders, like I just inherited Uncle Ernie's estate and a couple of $100,000 or a couple of million. I'm going to be a trader. Great. I tell you what, do you want to go and see the surgeon that's picked up the book on DIY brain surgery, who got it yesterday, and he's now in the operating theater? Well, you can't do that as a surgeon, but you can as a trader. You can put $2 million in an account today and start trading it today with zero idea. Now let's go back to the 7.5-year cycle, the 7-year itch. Trading is a profession. You want to do at least 7 years, and you want to understand risk. And as I said about the lady trader I was telling you about, that big light bulb went on recently, and she was always after the profits. Now it's all about stopping the losses and managing the risk. And now she's incredibly successful, because she doesn't look at her profits. She just looks at the risk, and as soon as a loss starts coming in, she's out. So it's the same thing. So, it's going to take you 7 years to get the hang of trading, probably. You can fast track it. And, we've studied with people who teach modeling. You want to find the best people in the game and implement that. And then, another 7 years gets you to, where you can probably live off what you're doing quite easily, or you might be able to do that after 2 or 3 years. I know people that have done it who really applied themselves. And that's what we've done. We have a course that goes along with it, because what happened was we created this information for hedge funds, and they'd use it as 5%, 10% of their decision-making process. And then we started attracting retail people once we created the report. And they're like, well, what am I supposed to do with it? And it's kind of like, well, you probably shouldn't have this if you don't know what to do with it. Give it back to me. It's like, kids should not be taking those tablets and things, right?
Yeah, don't play with matches.
Exactly. Yeah, that's a better one. Don't play with matches. So then we thought, actually, perhaps we should teach them how to use matches. So the best of what I've done over 30 years, the best trading techniques. So I threw out 90%, I put it into a course, and we have so many successful traders just doing those simple techniques. In fact, there was a dentist guy that we taught, and we actually did the course live just before the pandemic, and then I don't know, the promoters charging $25,000 a head, and I just put it online during the pandemic for $3,000 so everybody could use it. This dentist guy said, there was one technique you showed. He said, out of the 5 big techniques, I just used that. And then he said, I did so well after 6 months. I reduced my dentistry. And he said, now I don't even do dentistry. Said,
really?
Don't even do it. He said, just in a trade, I actually day trade or short-term trade currencies over a couple of days. I make so much money. I don't have the stress of running the dental practice, the the nurses, the administrators, the real estate, the liability insurance. I go and play. I trade. I go play golf. I sell my boat, and that's it. And he's probably cracked it better than me, but I'm obsessed with finding the truth out on these cycles, so I'm on my mission. So there's never a dull moment here. But it's this idea of you know uh, many of you will be aware of the six human needs, and what is it that drives you, right? And this, if you're on a mission to figure out this, you know, the variety of what's behind all this, and that's my mission. It's growth, right? And I want to figure this out. Other people want the certainty of I know I can make so much money a day or X percentage on my account, and in fact, like our friend in Australia, that's
Yep.
exactly what she does. She's a very good, very excellent trader, very good self-discipline, very wealthy lady. That's it. So it's that. So that's the certainty side of it there, right? So uh, that's what it's all about.
Earlier you were talking about, like, I don't know why I thought of this, but when you were just chatting, Ray Dalio used to have a question. He asked himself one question all the time. I saw him speak, and he said, I used to ask the question, how do I make more money? And then he went broke. I forget what year it was. And he said he remembers sitting in the office, sitting on the floor. There's him and his assistant, and everybody else is gone. And he's blowing up like 3/4 of their fund. And he said, in that moment, I changed my question from how do I make more money to how do I not lose any more money? And that change in his question is what changed everything. And he's one of the most successful. He's got to be on the top 10 list, wouldn't he be, in the world of traders and investors? God, he's got to be, right?
This is
He's a
exactly the
legend.
story of the lady I was telling you about just now and referred to earlier, because that was the big light bulb. And I just thought that is so clean. And that you said exactly the same story. It's just phenomenal. It's all about, just managing the risk, managing the losses, and then everything else will take care of itself. And you will get, even though I say there's no such thing as a home run, there is every now and then. There really is. When you can see the opportunity, if you get in there, and we got home runs at the 2020 top, and
Yeah.
2 years later as well. Yeah, yeah.
But I think to that point, and that I think this is, for the audience, for the listeners, is this is not just about trading. You apply trading, like trading. If you've not traded, you can apply trading and the psychology of trading and the psychology of risk management to your everyday life. You will see patterns in your trading that come up absolutely with everyday life. And I got a friend who he swings for the fences. Well, actually, Kim asked him one day, "What's your trading? What's your trading strategy?" And he said, "Chaos." And so, and he parties in chaos, right? Like, we have a good time, but so you'll see these patterns come up. But I think even in your business, you'll see patterns, and you know you can hit a home run in business, but even if you hit a home run, if you are not making base hits, you're very unlikely to win the long-term game of business. You can't rely on the home runs. You've got to hit your base hits, base hits, base hits. That's how you drive runners over the base. And then, bang, you hit a home run, and that's the icing on the cake. But it is not the foundation of how you do it. And so I think, to relate the point of trading in that way and managing risk, it's critical in business.
Yeah, I think that's exactly it. And one of the market wizards, Ed Secoda, so yeah, he always says everybody gets from trading what they want from it. Okay, and it's kind of like some of you will make money because that's what you want, but some of you just want to say you trade. Some of you kind of like are just playing out your own victim patterns and losing money in markets as opposed to having bad relationships or whatever it is. And it's the same with business, right? It's exactly the same. And it's the I've been there. I've messed up some pretty good businesses in a fine manner, and you know you got to reflect and debrief. And this is, again, we're back to flying, right? What do we do after a flight? We debrief. We have a post-flight review. What do we do after a simulator session? We debrief. We go into details. Why did something go well? Why did something go not so well? And what can we do differently? And that's what you need to do in business. And it's kind of like, well, funnily enough, I've just employed this with one of the side businesses that we were talking about earlier, which is in the whiskey industry. About we had a pretty big set of meetings earlier this week, and it was the idea of, well, let's debrief. What did we get out of this? What worked? What didn't work? Was it a good investment? What would we change next time? And who do we follow up now for the biggest bang for buck? And all the rest of it. And that's really important. It's, people don't, well, actually, the other thing I say is that people who are good at things do things instinctively. They just know it, and they don't realize they're doing these things. But the ability to adapt is really important. Now, let me just, and this has just come to my mind. I think it's relevant. They can be the finest businessmen, but they cannot trade. And the reason being is that you gotta have to be able to cope with uncertainty. And like some of the hard-nosed businessmen will push things through and want it the way you want it to do, and they'll be successful with it, right? But they might be pretty hard-nosed. They might fire people as they go along, and they get their outcome, and they get a successful business, a good bottom line on it. But what they can't do is, like, if they've decided that the 30-year bond is doing this from their analysis, and they've taken the position, they cannot accept that the 30-year bond is, or the S&P 500, or oil, or wheat, or or Amazon stock is not doing as they expected. And that's where they don't have the versatility to get out or swap that position. And I think that is so critical. So that's the difference. Now, I also know business people who are very successful traders. Now, let's take this into flying. What's the difference with flying? So you've already, mentioned it. You had a bit of a moment in your helicopter as you approached the gust front of a storm, right? So, what do we have? Is if we're flying along in a jet and we see a thunderstorm ahead of us, we're not going to go through it, okay? Even though our flight plan might take us through it, we're going to turn around it, because thunderstorms can do a lot of damage to even big jets. They can take them out of the sky. So you've got to have the ability to notice. Well, in fact, let me bring this thing of flying in as well. There's 3 phases of operation for anything, and that's why I'm bringing them in. You're either at the notice level, the understand level, or the think ahead level, right? So taking them in reverse order. If you're thinking ahead, you've made your plan, you see the storm, you're going to reroute to avoid it. Understand is you get there and you go, oh crap, there's a storm right ahead. Let's turn right immediately. And then notice is you didn't even see the storm, and you go through it and you get shaken around a bit and you manage to get out in time. So what is it about your business? Are you at the think ahead level? Are you at the notice, understand level, or are you at the notice level? So that's what it is about your life. Now, if you're at notice, you got a problem, because you're not going to see something coming. And like a lot of businesses were at the notice level for the pandemic. Okay, yeah, it was a black swan in many ways. It's not like people sit around looking for pandemics. So, but you can see how this works. But if you're thinking ahead, well, actually, there's something on the radar now about a pandemic possibly in the next few weeks. You've still got time to switch. You're in the middle. Then you kind of either think ahead or you're in the understand level. I got to do something pretty fast, right? So this is what it is about business. Which level are you at? Are you at notice, understand, and think ahead? So typically, to remember the capacity bucket we were talking about, if you can keep that empty, i.e. you have plenty of capacity to deal with what lies ahead, and you were talking about the tunnel vision when you were looking, you could only focus on one instrument because your capacity bucket filled up. Well, if you're thinking ahead, your capacity bucket's going to be relatively empty. But, if your capacity bucket's full, you're only going to be noticing, and then you're going to have to react. So, if you're reacting, yeah, you've already hit the problem. But if you're thinking ahead, you're avoiding. Yeah. And actually, when we talk about notice, understand, and think ahead, thinking ahead, you're avoiding. Understanding, you're trapping. And noticing when you hit the storm is when you're mitigating, right? So think about business, right? Are your taxes straight? Maybe, you thought it through, you've taken advice, you're pretty good. the IRS or whoever you have in Canada, the HMRC here, call you up and go, yeah, talk to my accountant, bye. Or you get the notice, right, we're doing a full audit. And so, oh, crap, now I need to find the expensive lawyers and, oh, yeah, we'll charge you the premium rate. We can take care of this. But, you're worried as well, right? And things like that. So at that point, you're having to mitigate. You're having to find the expensive guys, So think about avoid, trap, mitigate. And it's a case of whether you're, noticing, understanding, or thinking ahead.
I'll just use this as an example, but you go back to the helicopter example that I used earlier, which was, my bad decision making started on the ground, even before, a quick version of it is I was lifting off of an airport trying to get home. The fast way to get home was turn north and cut across the storm, and then fly around it. The slower way, and I had already set my outcome to get out as quick as possible, we were also coming into darkness. So I had, those kinds of, that's just the brief version. The longer, less risk way would have lift off, turn south, fly away from the storm, go out and around it, and still probably land before dark. It doesn't take that much longer. It's not like it's 20 minutes. It's like 2 minutes. But I was so focused. I was so tunnel visioned on my outcome that it caused me to make a mistake and then put me into bigger problems. And that's what we do in business. I'm using it as an example just for listeners to go, where have I in the past been so focused on my outcome and not considered some of the things you just said and some of your points that it got me into trouble.
Well, let's just put that into the context of the concepts we've already discussed. You wanted to get home. It was FOMO, fear of missing out, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's the first thing that came in. So this is hope, right? Hope or greed, potentially, greed in inverted commas, but it's a type of greed, right? It's like, 100%. I want this, I'm going to get it, right? And then, you are actually potentially, avoid, trap, mitigate. Well, part of you knew there was a storm, right? So maybe you could have avoided it, but then it's going to be a pain in the ass. I'm going to have to stay in a hotel here, or I'm going to miss dinner or whatever, And then, the next thing was maybe I can trap it by going the other way around. And then you ended up having to mitigate it because you got a problem. And, you got away with it. So this time you got away with it. So, that was it. But what happened, when you're on the ground, your capacity bucket was already slightly full, not just of whatever business stuff you're dealing with, whatever's going on with your family, your health, everything. There's always something in the capacity bucket. Then you thought, actually, man, there's a storm. So the storm went into the bucket. Now your bucket's half or 2/3 full, and you haven't even lifted, right? You haven't even got the cyclic going and everything, and you're already kind of like, there's a degree of apprehension, right? There probably was a bit of lack of certainty. And in fact, here's the thing. Let's bring this in. If you're not sure about things, we do a bit of risk management. We have a risk management tool, and it's called BRAN, or you can use Brain, and some industries use Brain. So think about something. Well, let's use BRAN. B is for benefits. So R is for risks, A is for alternatives, and N is for nothing. So B is for benefits. What's the benefit of me lifting off in this situation? I get home, I get dinner, all the rest of it. What are the risks? Well, it's a great big QNM. Was it a QNM? Was it cumulonimbus cloud there? Yeah, right.
No, it was like a really bad storm shower, like rushing down.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, so it was more a frontal activity because the risk is a front coming through, right? What are the alternatives? Well, the alternatives, I could actually stay on the ground here, or I could fly somewhere else, or I could do nothing, which is actually staying on the ground. There's the same as an alternative. But you can also put that into brain. Benefits, risks, alternatives, and then I is intuition. What's my gut feeling telling me? Now, as airline pilots, we don't tend to use intuition. They don't like that because it's not scientific enough, right? But you'll always have a gut feeling. And, you get that gut feeling like, I don't like the look of that cloud. I don't like the look of that weather forecast. The what we call the TAFs and actuals, the terminal area forecasts and the actual weather, the METARs. So, there is that intuition as well. And it's the same in business, and it's the same in trading. And it's kind of like, I think my intuition's this is a great trade. This could be a really good one. But there's another thing like, well, I'm getting in here, but I'm not sure if that cycle's as strong as it is, or there's so many cycles they might cancel something out. So there's that intuition there. But sometimes it's like when you do a business deal, like this is a no-brainer, right? I mean, I've got an opportunity sitting here. I thought this is a no-brainer, and I called somebody else up, and he said, "Hang on a minute, you haven't thought about this, 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 and this." I was like, "Oh yeah, good point." Well, after what happened 20-something years ago with Keith Cunningham, where he said, "You're the only one that wants this, buddy. I don't think you're going to go broke pretty quickly." So what is it you're not seeing, right? And that's that. So you can do a risk analysis or something. So just to recap that: B for benefits, R for risks, A for alternatives. Put the I for intuition in, and N for nothing. You've done an analysis, and it's okay to proceed as you are going to do. So.
Yeah, and sometimes nothing is everything. To be honest with you,
nothing is the best alternative.
Keith also has a saying, and I think this is really good for people, which is progress is not necessarily measured by ground gained. It's sometimes measured by yards not lost.
Yeah, and what you just said is the same as trading and investing. It's not about your profits; about what you didn't lose.
Yeah.
That's exactly it. So this is a constant theme, be it business, trading, whatever you want to call it. Yeah.
Dude, this is awesome. Thank you so much. I so much appreciate your time. Hey, I'd be remiss to, I want to ask, actually, I'm curious, de-dollarization, do you see the US dollar continuing to drop?
As my friend Harry Dent says, I mean, Harry and I have very opposing views at times. I always want to stress that, right? Yeah. But Harry does. I really want to stress that he's one of my best buddies, and we will discuss a lot of stuff. But we have very different views on stuff, which is what makes a great friendship.
Right.
Especially the markets. So I stick to my views on the markets. But Harry does say, "Is the dollar is the best house in a bad neighborhood," and I think that's probably still the case at this moment in time. But the black swan. It's not really going to be a black swan. You can already see it happening. The BRICS nations, the change of the 250-year cycle, which I haven't told you about, the empire cycle, is in play right now, and there is a shift from the Occident to the Orient, as it's called, from the West to the East, and I think that could be. They could announce a digital currency. It could happen any day. That could be backed. And it's all these things it'll never catch on. And it won't catch on to start with, but it will catch on because FOMO will come in, and that's it. That's it. And, one of the big things amongst my pilot colleagues is, Airbus are trying to create a single pilot airliner, the other pilot being a drone operator on the ground, and it's kind of like, well, we're not that far away from airline. Well, airline is already being flown without pilots. Boeing have developed them. Pilots say it's never going to happen. Well, man, people wouldn't get on a train without an engine driver, a locomotive driver on it. There's plenty of trains without those. There's autonomous cars, and it's only going to take a low-cost operation like Ryanair, or I don't know, Southwest, but the guy who runs Ryanair is the sort of guy who's like, we got the first planes without pilots, and I was like, we ain't going anywhere near them. £1 a seat. Okay, I'll give it a go, right? yeah, and that's how it will start, and it will work. There will the space shuttle was never flown by anybody. That was automatically controlled, and that's technology that's 40 years old now, right? 40, more than 40 years old. It's about 40 years.
Essentially, the planes that you fly take off and land on their own, anyways, don't they?
They don't take off on their own.
Okay,
but they do. You can also land pretty much every wide-bodied airliner, and now in as little as 75 meters visibility in fog. Yeah.
Wow, that's
and
incredible.
It's only 75 meters because technically you can do 0, but then you can't vacate the runway. And actually, they brought the 75 meters in for rescue and firefighting, because if there's an incident or something, the rescue services can't see you in 0 visibility.
Right.
So that's why they predicated 75 meters. That's been happening for a long while. That's been there for the last 30 years, 40 years. So, in fact, that was pioneered in at that time of the late 60s, where I talked about the big sea change in air travel, the arrival of the jumbo jet, mass travel, supersonic flight with Concorde, also the arrival of the wide-bodied tri-jets, the Lockheed TriStar and the DC-10. The Lockheed TriStar was the first one, along with the British Trident, to pioneer the automatic landing system. So, yeah, I mean, it's there already. It's just a case of mindset. So why don't you want to go on a pilotless airliner? Because it's not hope, it's fear. Okay, how do we overcome fear? Offer them a greed factor. Come on, £1 a seat. Oh, okay, I'll try it.
Yeah.
And that's it. And that's how a new technology comes in. And then it accelerates.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely see the pilotless eVTOLs and stuff in the future. I mean, I don't think there's any question that that's where we're going to go.
In fact, on this note, one of the things that I talk about with certain agencies and other things is that in air combat, so go back to World War II dogfights, go back to more recent conflicts, well, Korean War, maybe things like that, 1950s, through the Cold War, the 60s, maybe even up to, not so much in the Gulf Wars because there was no real opposition, but aerial combat has been skin in the game of each pilot. They don't want to die, and they want to take the other guy out. Now, what if you've got drone aerial combat? There's a drone operator here and a drone operator there. And they know that at 6 p.m. they're off duty and they're going to the bar and then they're going to go to a dinner party. And they're sitting in Phoenix. Meanwhile, they're killing people over Afghanistan. Now, what if they get into combat with somebody else who's sitting somewhere over there knowing that they're off duty at 6 p.m. as well, and they're going for it? There's no skin in the game. How far can you push it if there's no skin in the game? You can push it over the top, right?
Mm-hmm.
There is no regulatory valve there. There's no pressure relief valve. That's where things are not good for where we are right now. Drones means there's no skin.
Yeah, that's interesting. It's a very good point. Yeah, no, it's a really good point, man. My last question was actually going to be, when's the next Black Swan event? And then you threw out this 250th year cycle that we haven't talked about yet. So, dare I ask, what is the 250 year? Obviously that is east to west. Is that?
Well, that's more of the America cycle. So, we can take 1776 as the beginning of America as we know it right now, or the present version of America. In reality, it started way before that, 1765, the Stamp Act and things like that. But if we take 1776 at 250 years, it's an approximate 256 years, a little bit less than, 250 years. It's a little bit less than that. Takes us to 2026, right? And it's kind of like an empire death and rebirth cycle. Okay, so what we're going to see is we're in the end of the American empire, the American age as we've known it. And basically, it's all change. And this is where we're going to see this possible swing. But, this is documented in Zero that we wrote a while back, Harry and myself. But you can double that, 250 years times two. This is all relating to 2017. If you went back 500 years to the year 1517, that was when Martin Luther nailed the 95 Theses to the church door in Wittenberg and started the Protestant Reformation. They were challenging the Catholic faith, the Catholic church. So what we saw was a 500-year cycle, the 250-year cycle. That's why the world is this massive part. They're all stacking together. Remember, we're all getting to the cafe at the same time. So we're in this period of massive change. There's two of these cycles coming together. One of these cycles, the balance of power in the world, and I don't just mean political power. The balance of power is in a very slow process of swinging. That's what we're seeing. And China was the dominant nation thousands of years, not even that many thousands of years ago. So, and there's no reason why it wouldn't be again. Britain was a dominant nation. It lost its dominance in the 1930s with the fall of the pound and also the move towards America. America was always very threatened by Britain, and that was one of the reasons they were very cautious about entering the Second World War. They didn't want to support Britain because in 1939, if America came in supporting Britain against Hitler, that would have reinforced the case for the British Empire, which America did not want a British Empire. America wants an American empire, and that's what was going on there. So you can see how all these things work, and there's nothing altruistic about any of this. It's all about who's in power. And of course,
they had to wait until you guys were on a shoestring, and then they came in to help.
Dead right. And then after the war, Bretton Woods, let's peg everything to the dollar. America came in, played a big part in the war, stopped, the Nazis and everything. And the next thing is that's when the American empire started rising up, as it were.
Where does the British Empire fall in it? Does it fall in the 250 year, or is that a split to 125?
Yeah, you can. There's so many different parts of the British Empire. There's India. There's parts of Africa. There's all sorts of different things. So again, very complex. So it's a little bit too simplistic to put it into those patterns. Yeah. But within those patterns, you can see as India got independence. You can see how the cycles from India spun out. You can see how the cycles from other nations, spun out. And then right now there's, 3 years ago, Barbados, which is a British protectorate, that Britain let go of that. And straight away, China is building infrastructure there in Barbados and so on. And if you've read The Art of War, Sun Tzu, which is one of the best books for anything to do with business, physical conflict is the last thing you want. You do not want physical conflict. Do everything economically. China goes in, puts infrastructure, and everybody's happy. Unfortunately, there's a cost to it. You got to pay the loan back when it's called in. And when that loan's not paid back, somebody else is going to own those places. And it's happening in so many places now. Same in Jamaica as well.
It's already happened in Africa, all over the place.
Over Africa,
all over Africa.
Yeah. I've spent a lot of time in different parts of Africa with the flying. You see it. And where it's done pretty well. I wouldn't be averse to sort of, actually, this is a lot better than what we had before sort of thing. But when the loans call back in and it's kind of, well, we can't pay it. So it's okay. Well, we'll just fly a Chinese flag here now. And that's it. But it's an economic win for that state and China. There's nothing, it's kind of like, what's the problem with it? There's no problem with it.
Yeah.
Those people are actually benefiting. They've got resources and water and things which they never had before. So that's it. It's a subtle thing, and we're in the cycle from the Long March, the rise of China, and so on, and that's where we're at now. I know the West then tries to sort of say, well, they're bankrupt, the property's wrecked, everything's wrecked in China. There's too much debt. There might well be, but it's still growing, in its own way.
Yeah. This is always such a fascinating conversation, and it's so deep and it's so complex. And I think to your point, it's, you need a multitude of resources to be able to understand all the components and your cycles are a key component to that. I mean, I've seen it. They're accurate. They're so accurate.
Well, cycles are really a framework with which you can create understanding. Mm-hmm. It's something to hang your hat on. It's not perfect. Well, they probably are perfect, but we haven't figured them out to that level of perfection.
Right. Yeah. Interesting. That's an interesting point. We'll wait till our computing power gets a little bit more robust, and then that'll probably be evident.
Yeah.
Dude, thank you so much. It's like midnight at your time. I'm so grateful for the time you spent with us.
It is, yeah.
You're so awesome.
It's been a blast. You're an amazing guy. You've done an incredible job with this podcast. It's been my real honor and pleasure. I'm very grateful to you for inviting me onto this, and it's been a lot of fun discussing all this stuff. And don't take my word for it. If you're watching, go and figure it out for yourself, and let me know what you figured out. So we'll crack this together.
Yeah, I'm re-upping on the market timing report, and so how do people find you? Let's get that out of the way, and then
So the easiest way, there's two ways. If you're interested in the market timing report, markettimingreport.com. And let me just explain. That's a monthly publication that gives some geopolitical commentary, and then we, whatever's topical, what might be on the horizon. We do a year ahead report where we do a little bit of a forecast for what the markets might hold, as well as what the key geopolitical topics are going to be. That's where we made things like the year ahead predictions for the Middle East crisis and time them accordingly. And then we look at potential turning points, price targets, and charts for S&P gold, crude oil, dollar index, euro, and Bitcoin. And that's it. And that's there to help you as a trader. Now, for those of you that don't have a trading system, we've created the Market Timing Report trading course, so you can use that with that. And we also have a new platform which gives you the best seasonal profiles for US stocks, British stocks, commodities, indices, everything. And we put AI into that, and we think that's a cutting edge platform we just launched. And then for those of you who are more investors, we've got a platform where we look at what the smart money's doing, and it's based on a deep analysis of the commitment of traders data. So we know which markets are going to move big time. So these are the long-term, more investment plays, and that covers 42 instruments. And we can see, because in America, all big traders have to declare their positions, and you can see how the balance is moving, and when you get to a certain level, something's going to move. And also, we've got the timing with the reports and the cycles. We've got the direction with the big money stuff. We've got the seasonality. And we also do a bit of work on grains. And then, of course, there's a consultancy to various operations. So that's the whole thing. That's all at markettimingreport.com. And the rest of it, you can also get hold of me at andrewpancholi.com for the one-on-one consultancy stuff, which varies from anything from hedge funds to agencies to people who are interested in moving into different areas and so on, and wanting a view on a geopolitical thing. Like, is such and such a country a good place for us to build a new power plant or a plant or something, or whatever, and so on, and what's the potential outlook? Because we can sometimes see something, we can't always see it, it's not perfect. And all of this, everything to do with cycles, is about increasing your situational awareness a little bit. It's not all going to work, but it's going to give you an incremental edge over somebody who's not using it. And that's all you need. And, in the game of fund management, they always say, you don't have to be the smartest or the best producer. You've only got to be able to, it's like a tiger's chasing you. You've only got to be the second fastest. The second least slow, the second slowest, because the tiger's going to get the slowest guy and you're going to live. So it's that right. Sort of thing. But, this is, as one of my mentors told me that. But yeah, that's what it's all about. There's no holy grail, but it's about incremental gains. And I think it's fascinating, and it certainly works for us and our clients.
It's absolutely fascinating. And you work with some pretty massive clients. So, it obviously is working. So I'm so grateful for you. I love you. And next time we see each other, we're going to have to get into some of that whiskey that you guys started up with your buddy, at Storyman Whiskey, right? Isn't that?
Yeah. Well, yeah. First of all, big hug back to yourself and to Neil. And this is what we've done here. So for a bit of fun, here we go. Storyman Whiskey. There we go. That way around, right? And my big buddy James Cosmo here. He Game of Thrones, Braveheart, Troy, 150 Hollywood movies, Sons of Anarchy, you name it. Train Spotting, multi-award winner. In fact, we launched this whiskey for a bit of fun because we sit around and talk. He loves talking geopolitics, politics, and all the stuff we've been talking about. So we're just, the first container's going out towards America and Canada. So this is it, Storyman Whiskey and James Cosmo there.
Dude, that's awesome. I'm buying a bottle when it gets over here. Text me and let me know. I'm gonna get one. Okay, man. Thanks so much. Get some rest. I know it's midnight over there. Love you, bro.
I'm buzzing. Love you guys. Send love to Tanil, and it's been a lot of fun.